Hi everyone, and welcome to Book Days. The book of the day is How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight by Jane Yolen, illustrated by Mark Teague. This book is a whimsical tale exploring the idea of what bedtime might look for dinosaurs. Do they put up a fight, or do they turn out the lights? To see how the story ends, find it in your local bookstore or library today. And now it's time for our adventure. We're off to Houston, Texas to find our own dinosaurs. I'm so excited. Let's go. Excited. Today our adventure has taken us to the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and today I'm joined with Colin Diggins, paleontology laboratory technician. Colin, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure, thank you.
I'm so excited to learn about the world of dinosaurs, in particular the world of fossils today, and this is one of the best exhibits in Texas and in the country. So today's book is How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight? And I couldn't think of a better place than this amazing hall. Colin, it looks like all these dinosaurs are somewhat in their own way asleep. They're almost like frozen in time, and this is so incredible how many different ones you have. So can we start with probably the most famous dinosaur, the T-Rex?
Absolutely. So this one specifically is named Y-Rex. Y-Rex here is an original fossil. He's probably the second best preserved T-Rex in the world. He's more than 50% complete. He's also, we often call a bob-tailed T-Rex, because if you look down the end of his tail there, he's actually missing the end of it. Actually, we believe that was because it was bitten off while he was alive. Yeah, it turns out T-Rex probably didn't play so well with each other, because the only thing that was going to be strong enough to bite through the bone of that tail is going to be T-Rex teeth.
Wow. And Colin, I'm so impressed by this particular skeleton that you mentioned that it's 50% original bone and fossil. That's like super rare to find in a museum.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of the best preserved in the world. It's got the only example we know of a third finger in T-Rex, the best preserved feet of any T-Rex out there. A lot of the bones on here are going to be original. The skull, unfortunately, is going to be a cast or a replica, but we do have a bunch of his skull as well. It's just too important to put on display. I gotta show off our Triceratops. Laying here is one of the stars of our Paleo Hall. Laying here is actually the best preserved Triceratops in the world.
Really?
Also has the best preserved feet of any Triceratops out there, although again we've got the replicas on display because the real ones are just too precious to put out. I recently visited Japan during the Olympics actually, but we have the original back on display now. Of course, Triceratops is always well known for the 3 horns, the 2 brow horns and the 1 nose horn. We actually love to call Lane here a dinosaur mummy because she's so well preserved that we actually have mummified skin along the back wall over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's take a look.
Absolutely. So yeah,
this is the skin.
Absolutely. And if you look really closely, this is going to be the negative impression of the skin, and those dimples in there are why we actually believe that, like most ceratopsians, Triceratops actually had feathers. Not really what we think of as feathers today, where it has the branching, light, soft side parts, but it's the central quill, almost like a porcupine, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That is so interesting. And how do paleontologists, people in the field, figure that this is part of the skin?
Well, actually, it used to be we believed there wasn't any skin fossilized, that it just couldn't happen. It was a couple of dinosaur mummies that showed up fairly early on, where you could see the bones, but just above the bones we have, this is going to be the original skin down here. That dimpling surface right there was one of the things they noticed in certain formations, so that these days they're a lot more careful when they've got good preservation to try not to dig straight down to the bone level If you look at how thick this is, that's actually how thick we think their skin was. So it's
Oh my
incredibly thick
word.
hide, yeah. I always love to say, if you look at the thick hide, the quills that stick out of it, the brow horns, which also would have had a sheath made out of keratin, like our fingernails or hair on it, so those would have been even longer and sharper. And it also has a beak almost like a parrot as well, which would have had that keratin sheath, which would have been kind of sharp as well. This is an animal that has some pretty formidable defenses.
Oh my word! You always think of like the T-Rex and like the really fierce ones, but then our beloved Triceratops, like that just puts him in a whole new league.
Absolutely, but when you got T-Rex wandering around, it helps to have ways to defend yourself.
No doubt, and I love how the T-Rex versus the Triceratops here, it just kind of mimics that. Now, Colin, do you think that they would go to sleep without any problems?
Oh, they probably would have put up a little bit of a fuss, but yeah, it's important. Sleep is necessary even for these animals to be able to function.
So these animals actually did sleep like
Absolutely.
Regular animals?
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
They had to, yeah. It turns out most large animals have to have at least some downtime. All of us tetrapods, as we like to say, all of us four-limbed animals seem to have to get our head down at least sometimes.
Awesome. So even dinosaurs went to sleep. So all the kids watching, don't feel bad when mom and dad say you have to go to bed, because even the dinosaurs did. All right, well, let's continue the tour.
All right. Should we go see the long-necked dinosaur,
Absolutely.
our sauropod? But this is a Diplodocus, specifically Diplodocus heyi. It's what we know, what we call a typed specimen. So she is the first Diplodocus heyi ever discovered. So if anybody finds a Diplodocus and they think it might be Diplodocus heyi, they come and compare it to Dipsy here to make sure it's the same species.
Dipsy, I love how all of the specimens here are named.
Yeah, each specimen gets a nickname. It's usually nicknamed by the person who first discovers it. Sometimes they name it after themselves, sometimes they name it after a beloved family member or a landowner. Often though, sometimes it gets nicknamed after just the species in general, so obviously Dipsy, the Diplodocus.
I love it.
A lot of the limb bones here are original, some of the vertebra as well, I believe. I know the ribs are original as well. If you look really closely, running along the inside of the ribs there, you might spot the metal that's holding them up. Actually, it used to be, a few years back, the ribs that were on display were made out of rubber. So if the building vibrated at all, like when we had our energy hall and they would set off it was pneumatic air gun that was used in surveying underwater for oil and natural gas, the ribs would actually vibrate. You could see them kind of wiggle. So they decided to replace those with the originals. Now, just like our other fossils, unfortunately, we don't have our original skull on display because that is too precious, but we did have that on display a few years back in an exhibit that was called Curator's Choice. It was all of our curators got to pick their favorite objects out of the museum that were not on display and put them out for people to see. So we had Dipsy's brain case on display for a while.
Oh, how fun.
And obviously the long neck there is great for reaching up into trees to strip leaves off of branches, but we've also got her rearing up on her back legs to be able to reach even higher up. But there's one thing about our mount here that's not really accurate. Turns out if they're reaching up, standing up on back two legs, that tail should be all the way down on the ground.
Floor.
Yeah, so that they'd have that third point of stabilization. But if we did that, everybody'd be able to touch it, and we wouldn't want that, so we had to put it up.
And so this dinosaur was a herbivore, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely, a vegetarian.
I don't know how this dinosaur could fit in a regular bed.
Right? It would have to be a very large bed. I don't think even a California king would work.
No, I don't think so either. Fantastic. Shall we move on to this wonderful specimen?
Yeah, so this is our Stegosaurus. Yay! Now, unfortunately, this one is a replica. It's not an original fossil, but I do love in the book, it talked about Stegosaurus slamming its tail, because of course, one of the most iconic parts of this animal are the huge tail spikes on the end.
Yes.
Depending on the species, could be up to 2 to 3 feet long.
Wow.
They're called thagomizers, actually, which is kind of funny because that name originally came from a Far Side cartoon where those didn't have a name at all, and the cartoonist Gary Larson came up with a name. He said it was named for the late Thag Simpson, and called them thagomizers, and paleontologists decided to adopt that name for the real structure. So these are our duck-billed dinosaurs just over here, actually.
Yeah. It's like Land Before Time.
Absolutely, yeah. So these are actually both original fossils. We have a juvenile and an adult in here. They're actually what we call composites, so they're not made up of one individual, but a whole bunch of individuals where we could find the right arm of one, the left arm of another, the ribs of one, the tail of a different one, and they compile them together to make one mount, which actually means that these are more than 90% complete.
Wow.
Original bone, yeah, which is pretty amazing.
And they call them the duck-billed dinosaurs because of their
the shape of
the
the
shape
mouth
of their
right there. You can
mouths.
kind of see it's got a little bit of a duckbill too. They're also called hadrosaurs, but these are specifically Edmontosauruses. That's their species name. They're named for Edmonton, Canada. I really love that just in front of them here we actually have a replica of Edmontosaurus skin. So this is one, yes, you can actually touch if you want. You get a chance to pet a dinosaur.
Wow.
Yep. We like to call them Cretaceous cows sometimes because they seem to have been grazers that wandered long distances, munching on plants. And we actually think that they may have been tied to the rise of flowering plants because those don't show up until the Cretaceous. Anytime before that, the Jurassic, the Triassic, no flowers, which is a totally different world. So it also means no grasses either. So these guys are kind of associated with the spread of grasses. You can see they've actually got a couple of different poses here. When they're grazing, they're walking around on four limbs, so they can get their neck down towards the ground, towards that the vegetation. But when they want to move quickly, up on two legs, those arms are swept back along their side.
Describe exactly what a paleontology laboratory technician does and kind of where it fits in the field of paleontology.
Absolutely, yeah. So, of course, paleontology always starts with finding the fossils. It starts out in the field searching for them, but most of the work is actually done once those fossils make it back here to our lab.
Yes.
So, first step usually involves cleaning. Often they'll be surrounded by rock that we call matrix. We have to clean that off very carefully. It takes a lot of time and patience. So once the fossil's been cleaned, we start reassembling. After reassembling, that's when we can start to move on to creating those beautiful mounts out there if we have enough of an individual to be able to recreate the skeleton. Let me show you, so these are both examples of jackets, but the one I want to show you is one that's actually already been prepped by one of our volunteers, because most of our work is actually done by volunteers here. This one took one of our volunteers about 350 hours to prepare. It was all done just using hand tools. And in here you will spot a number of vertebrae, so those are part of the backbone, the spinal column. And then these long bones here are something that are called neural spines, because this is coming from an animal that's known as Dimetrodon. We have our handy little toy model here to give you an idea, although obviously he would have been much bigger. The top of his sail here could have been from anywhere from 4 to 6 feet tall. And then from the tip of his tail to the tip of his nose, anywhere from 9 to 12 feet long. The neural spines, though, are these bones here that hold up that fin or the sail that runs along his back.
Wow, this puts just a whole new meaning when you see things like this and the kids play with them. I feel like they're so commonplace, but then to see like the real deal here.
Yeah, so this is an actual Dimetrodon. It's not an entire one, unfortunately, because if it was, we'd try to remove them all from the rock and then reassemble the skeleton. We'd build a whole mount.
So, as far as fossils go like this, do you ever find just kind of where it was like pressed down like a perfect specimen, or all the bones are kind of everywhere?
Usually we find them all jumbled. We almost never find 100% of the animal, but that's when we're talking about land animals. If we're talking about sea creatures, oftentimes things that are fossilized in water, we can find the whole animal.
Oh, how cool.
They have been sometimes a little smushed, but the bones are still what we say articulated. They're all still right in the places they were on the animal when it was alive.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, so obviously we have a fossil fish here. This is what everybody in our lab trains on. This is what we first start prepping, because these are coming from that Green River Formation. They're so abundant that they're actually commercially available. So if somebody wanted to go out and buy a fossil and prep it themselves, they can do that. And we have the jaw of a T-Rex up here.
Cool.
Now this is just a cast, but it's what we call a research grade cast. So it is so accurate that we can actually study this rather than having to go study an original fossil. So on here you can see how T-Rex, their teeth fell out too. This is one where one's fallen out and they have a new one growing in. And these two obviously haven't fallen out just yet, but they've already got new teeth grown in underneath them.
Wow. So cool. It's interesting that you guys can use this for study instead of like the actual dinosaur fossil.
Yeah, they're pretty rare and hard to get a hold of. So people who make really, really high grade, good quality casts are wonderful people to know because they can make it so much easier to study these animals.
Okay, so we said we had a special surprise for them today. It is none other than dinosaur poop. Who wants to see dinosaur poop? Woo! Okay, Colin.
So technically this is what we call a coprolite. This is fossilized feces, yes. So you can kind of see it looks exactly like what it is. Of course, though, it's a rock now, so no squish, no smell. But this can be really important to us because we can learn about things like what animals we're eating. If we sometimes look inside them, if they were a carnivore, we can find little bits of bone.
Yeah.
Sometimes we even find teeth in them, which helps us to identify what animal it came from, because it turns out we don't tend to eat teeth, but sometimes if we lose teeth, we might accidentally swallow them, and they end up in the coprolite.
Oh man, the tooth fairy wouldn't find it.
Yeah.
So sad. Wow. So what kind of coprolite is this?
Actually, technically, this one is a turtle poo. Yes.
Oh, turtle. Wow. I didn't know if have there ever been discoveries of dinosaur coprolite?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. We don't happen to have any in our lab, unfortunately, but we've got a number on display from the Seymour site, the Permian-aged coprolites, actually.
Interesting.
On display in the hall.
Wow. So dinosaur fossils, wood fossils, ocean fossils, and poop fossils. Oh, Colin, Bill, this has been such a great tour and experience here at the Houston Museum of Natural Science, here at the Morian Hall of Paleontology. It's been absolutely incredible. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming adventures. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Want more book days? Well, the adventure has only begun. Check out these episodes and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming adventures.